Just allow a second for the councillors to appear from beneath the table.
No laptop.
Good morning, Councillor Mott. How nice to see you. Right, apologies for absence.
We have apologies from Councillor Moody and Councillor Jury, and Councillor Kimber is standing in for Councillor Jury. Thank you, Chair.
And Councillor Renders is standing in for Councillor Moody. Okay, declarations of interest. In accordance with the Code of Practice, members are invited to declare any disclosable pecuniary interests, other registrable interests and non-registrable interests, including the nature and extent of such interests that they may have in any items to be considered at this meeting. Are there any declarations of interest? Here. Items requiring urgent attention, I've been informed of none, so we'll move on. Confirmation of the minutes held on the 18th of July. I take it that everyone is content with those minutes. Thank you. Planning applications. There's only one for us to consider today, and it's in front of us not because it's contentious, but because it is the applicant is West Devon Borough Council, and our constitution requires that applications from the authority must be considered by the committee in public. So we're looking at application 131823 full, Tavistock North, the kiosk bus station. I'll hand over to the planning officer for a report. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, so as you've just heard, this application is here because the applicant is West Devon Borough Council. The proposal is to convert the existing offices into 3 flats with an associated courtyard area and soft landscaping to the front. So just so you all familiarise yourself, it is the building immediately adjacent to the bus station. Just got a Google image there for a bit of clarity. So this is the existing building. It's the white one that you can see here. There aren't any external changes proposed to the building apart from the landscaping areas to the front. So the physical building itself would just be altered internally. So just so you can see the proposed street view. So along the street scene, this wall would be slightly amended. At the moment, there's a little cut in, so they're going to make it flush with the pavement. This structure here would be a bin store, and you can see the hedging in front of it to hide it. So just so you can see the layout, so I've crossed out in yellow all the kiosk and bus station elements, so they're not being changed. At the moment, the building is 6 individual offices, so it's commercial use. So the proposal is to create a 1-bed flat on the ground floor, a 2-bed flat on the first floor, and a 1-bed flat in the top floor. So these flats would be retained by the council for temporary accommodation for vulnerable people, homeless people, perhaps people leaving care. So they wouldn't be permanent units, they would be temporary accommodation to be retained and kind of allocated as required by our housing team. And just so members are aware of the works to the front, as I said, there's a timber bin store. At the moment, it's all just tarmac and used for parking. So the proposal would be to extend the wall along the pavement, a raised planter, some hedges, a decked area, and then the bin store. So the details are a little bit vague at the moment, so there is a condition recommended requiring the details of the hard and soft landscaping to be agreed should the application be approved. So the key issues in this application are heritage. It's in the conservation area and the World Heritage Site. The heritage specialist has been involved at pre-app stage and in the application. He's got no objections subject to recommended conditions, which are detailed in the report. Principally, his concerns were ensuring that the front door is appropriate. He wants a timber door, so details of that to be provided. The stone wall at the front, obviously we want that to be in keeping with the existing stone wall. And details about the retention of the windows and requiring conservation-style roof lights. So affordable housing provision, obviously the council's declared a housing crisis. the introduction of 3 additional council-owned temporary accommodation units will reduce spending on bed and breakfast placements and just provide sort of better provision for people that need these units. There's quite a detailed response from our affordable housing team, which is detailed in the report, explaining why the units are needed. And the final key issue is the loss of employment space. So policy Dev 14 of the Joint Local Plan generally tries to prevent the loss of employment space, but it does provide for exceptions. One of those is where there are demonstrable community benefits. So the identified need for temporary accommodation, in my view, is considered to outweigh the loss of the employment space, considering the housing crisis. Assets who have submitted the application have also provided a bit of information about why they don't think the site is suitable for commercial let. At the moment it's vacant, it's never been fully occupied even pre-COVID, and obviously after that lettings went right down, and due to the size of it, things like headroom, they don't think that it's commercially viable to keep it for commercial use essentially. And that it will be a better use for the council to provide the temporary accommodation instead. So other issues, there isn't any parking provided. So in terms of highways, obviously we would normally like to have some parking, but given the town centre location right next to the bus stop, we think that that's okay. And obviously there will be less demand and less vehicle journeys compared to the current use, if assuming that the site was fully occupied with 6 different commercial offices. So in terms of ecology, bats have been identified in the site, not in the house itself, they're sort of in the undercroft. So a detailed mitigation scheme has been submitted and agreed with our consultant ecologist. And a Natural England Protected Species Licence will be required before any works start, and there are conditions to that effect to ensure that that is secured. In terms of design and landscape, as I said, there's no changes to the building, so in terms of design, not really anything to think about or worry about. The principle of the landscaping works are accepted and will secure the details by condition if permission is granted. And just finally, in terms of amenity, there's a mix of residential and commercial uses surrounding the site. It's semi-detached. The adjoining property is a private residence. So the change to a residential use doesn't raise any concerns in terms of things like noise, overlooking. We haven't had any objections, and Tavistock Council support the application. And finally, in terms of external amenity space, obviously you've just got that area to the front, so there's not a massive amount, but given where the site is, the proximity to parks, walks, leisure facilities, in this case we consider that that's an acceptable provision, and the recommendation is therefore conditional approval. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any questions for the planning officer? Councillor Renders.
Actually, a question on behalf of the person that I'm substituting for, and I will read it out here. Basically what he's saying is, are there going to be an inclusion of additional condition regarding adequate soundproofing given the fact of where it is, and that would be included in the build? Is that something that we could put down as a condition?
So in officers' view, it's not necessary, as I say, given the use of it as sort of residential flats and relatively small residential flats. Obviously, they're quite old buildings, they've got quite thick walls. I think the condition proposed was something about soundproofing in line with building regulations, but obviously that's a matter for, so building regulations would secure that if it was needed. And I think something else to note is if in the future noise was to become an issue, then obviously that's something that could be pursued through environmental health, noise nuisance and things like that. But personally don't think it's required or that we can really ask for it. Jack might in this case.
Thank you. I'll just relay that one on.
Yeah, I think as Charlotte has explained, it is a residential use. I don't imagine that there will be any cause for it to be noisy. They're quite small units, 2 of them being single occupancy. I don't think there's a need for it. However, if members are resistant, then of course we would add some form of condition to do that. But at this stage, I would say we don't think it's necessary.
But we could come back to it at a later date if it was to prove a problem, and the fact that it's in our possession anyway means that we could probably update it quite quickly.
Yes, and actually, in fact, any noise installation would not require planning permission. So, okay. Yes, cool. As an owner, you could come back to it if you wish.
Councillor Mott.
So, as a follow-on from that, and I'm not sure if this is what Councillor Renders was kind of implying, I don't suppose the noise was so much from external, but more the noise insulation between the three flats themselves, because I have had incidences where I've been contacted about the noise from a property that we have as temporary accommodation and how it impacts on the neighbours. So I would like to feel that there would be adequate noise insulation, not only between the three flats, but also to ensure that that noise from those properties weren't becoming a nuisance to neighbours.
I think the answer would be this. I think the answer would be the same, really, in that we don't anticipate it being an issue. Obviously, the conversion works would have to adhere to building regs, which is not something that we would personally get involved in. But again, if it were to become an issue, either the noise could be investigated through environmental health, or as Jack said, as the owners of the property, the council could always seek to improve it, and that wouldn't require planning permission because it's internal works.
Sorry, yes. As we know, it's always cheaper to do these things first than last. So I would suggest that is certainly looked into, if not conditioned.
Councillor Mann.
You say you're not anticipating any problem there, but I do know that that's right next to the bus station. And actually, all day long, the buses back up there, and it is a constant stream of backing up noises from a bus. It's extremely loud. I work next door in Abbey Surgery, and it's so loud that it sometimes overtakes phone conversations that I'm having in the surgery, which is actually quite a bit further away. So I actually think you should be concerned about sound, in particular from the external side, actually, for people who were trying to sleep, because the buses, I believe, run until 10 o'clock in Tavistock. So you're going to have that backing up noise with somebody, and it says in here that it could potentially be families or young people who've just come out of care. And then that backs on to the other question I had, which was, it says that it's for temporary homeless accommodation, which is great. Temporary homeless accommodation can last for up to 12 weeks, I think. Is that right? However, I just wonder how long our temporary accommodation in homelessness situations is actually lasting, because I know of some individuals for whom it is more than 6 months, which is not very temporary at all, and being next to that bus station with that noise coming in day and night might not be very pleasant for a half a year.
As we sort of said, if members feel that that's something that they want to add, we can absolutely add a condition. I think, as I say, we just need to make sure that we word it so we know exactly whether we're talking about external or internal between the flats. We do have one of our assets colleagues here, so if members are happy for me to defer to him to talk about what is currently proposed in the soundproofing, then that would probably be more useful to you.
And if you could also comment on the temporary nature, what that means, if you know.
Okay, so my name's Tom Morris. I work within the assets team for West Devon and South Hams. As far as the noise issue, first if I address that one, we're having acoustic noise surveys done currently on the building. As the planning officers have already said, some of the external walls of that property are thick. So obviously the less noise gets through that from the bus stations. The problem is where the windows are. Because of the heritage nature of the building, we're retaining the original windows, but what we are looking at is secondary glazing within inside of those to manage the noise levels. And then between the floors, they also, under building regs, will need to have noise insulation. And this survey that we're having done is done at the start of the project and also done at the end of the project to ensure that they're signed off to meet building regs. So that hopefully addresses your concerns over the noise issues. As far as the temporary accommodation bit, I'm afraid I'm outside of my area of expertise there. That's the housing team that would answer that. From my kind of knowledge of seeing the scheme so far, they're expecting people to stay here, which they're taking out of B&B accommodation, because they have nowhere else to put them at the moment. From what I've seen in their reports, they're saying between 6 and 12 weeks for those people to remain there until they can find more permanent accommodation for them. But the housing team would be able to come back to you on that. As far as their current timescales, I'm afraid I don't know.
Just having another look through the quite detailed report that Affordable Housing gave for this application. What they've said in terms of need is length of stays in temporary accommodation have increased to 108 days as move-on options become further impacted by the housing crisis. So that's all the information I've got in terms of that side of it, but hopefully that's a bit of help.
Okay, any other questions for the planning officer? Okay, we're now at the stage where we move the recommendation. The recommendation is for conditional approval. Can I have a seconder for that? Thank you. We're now in debate.
I just wanted to say that Councillor Moody had actually sent the letter, I think that he sent you to us as well. And we did say we would read it out, but I think if everyone's happy, I think we've addressed the issue that he'd raised anyway with regard to noise. So
I only picked it up late because I wasn't sure if
I think Councillor Moody's point also was consideration of the people that were living next door to the thing, rather than the noise from the bus station itself. And I think we've covered that in the questioning. So we're now in debate. If anyone's got any points they wish to raise before we go to a vote. No? Okay. All those in favour of the recommendation?
That's unanimous, Chair.
Sorry, Chair, can we just add to that recommendation, though, because of the need for the condition, should we, if members were happy, we would put the condition together and then agree it with the Chair and Vice Chair of Planning Committee? Is that acceptable? No? So that would be added to the...
There are no further planning applications for us to consider, so we're now on item 7 of the agenda, which is the planning appeals update. Alexander, would you like to take us through this?
Yes. So there are just 2 appeal decisions that we need to talk about. The first one, 052922 FUL, was for a replacement dwelling near High Hampton, Lower Longwood Farm. It was refused for 6 reasons, actually, and the appeal inspector agreed, actually, with most of the reasons. The situation was that there had been a previous prior agricultural approval to convert a barn to a dwelling on the site, and the applicants in the appeal submitted a unilateral undertaking to say that if the appeal was granted, they wouldn't carry out the prior approval. The inspector was not convinced by the unilateral undertaking that they submitted and felt that there was still a potential for 2 dwellings to be built on the site as opposed to 1. The application was submitted as a replacement dwelling, but they'd actually demolished one of the barn that had been given the prior approval. So, in fact, there was this potential for 2 dwellings as opposed to 1. So he agreed that it was in conflict with the replacement dwelling policy, which is TTV 29. He also felt, along with the case officer, that it's also in conflict with TTV 26.1, which is the development in the countryside policy. He also felt that, again, if 2 dwellings were constructed, or even if one were, there would be an impact in terms of car journeys, because it's not very close to anywhere with lots of facilities. He also felt that the proposed design would be inappropriate, and therefore there was an impact on the character and appearance of the countryside. In terms of housing need, he supported our position, which is actually quite helpful in appeals. We sometimes inspectors agree with our housing need data, and sometimes they don't. But in this case, he did agree, and the result, if 2 dwellings were constructed, would be 1 3-bed and 1 4-bed, both detached houses. And actually, within the area, the need is for much smaller units. So that's quite a positive aspect of this appeal. There was also a question about the living conditions, because both of the the replacement dwelling, even though it's not a replacement dwelling, was quite close to the current agricultural activities on the site. So he also felt that the living conditions potentially could be impacted by those agricultural activities. In terms of carbon reduction, we did put a reason for refusal on about lack of information, but he felt that there was sufficient. The proposal did include PV panels, a heat pump, insulated cladding, which was better than the prior approval would have had. So he felt that wasn't a justified reason. And the applicant also put forward that it could be a self-build property. Self-build properties are generally considered in sustainable locations, and he'd already acknowledged that it wasn't in a sustainable location, and therefore he didn't agree with that either. All but the carbon reduction policy, so the 6 reasons, so 5 of the 6 reasons he went along with. So a positive result. Yeah, he didn't. Yes. So that was quite a positive result. The only other one was a householder application at Moorview Lodge at Grenifin. The appeal in this case was upheld. It was an application for an extension to a house which had already been extended a number of times over the years. The case officer felt that the design and siting was inappropriate in a rural area, and also was concerned that the drainage had not been fully addressed through the planning application. The inspector, however, upheld the appeal and said that they felt that the extension would be subordinate to the main dwelling, and therefore was acceptable, and he or she, I don't know, didn't agree that the glazing would result in an impact on the Tamar Valley area of outstanding natural beauty. And with regard to the drainage, they felt that the drainage could have been secured via a planning condition. So therefore, we lost that one as it was upheld. And that's it in terms of appeals.
Any questions on any of the appeals? So move now on to undetermined major applications. This is a sort of information sheet. If any of you have any particular questions you want to ask about any particular application. Councillor Mott.
Yeah, can I, bottom page 21, 3041/22. I see that delegated approval was sought from members end of July, but we're now September. Has that not been issued yet then?
I had the very same question myself earlier this morning, and it actually has been determined. And in fact, there's a couple of other updates I'd like to make, if that's acceptable to members.
Please do.
The application 4000421 FUL, the revised plans now have been received for that and re-advertised, so they're in the advertisement period currently. The land adjacent to Baldwin Drive, Radford Way, Oakhampton, this is slightly complicated in that the applicant submitted a viability assessment, and we had that assessment assessed by our independent consultant, but in the meantime the applicant decided to go to appeal against non-determination. Just in terms of the viability, there appears to have to be roughly 200,000 available for some of the requirements through the Section 106 agreement. But that obviously we've stopped any of that process now because it's gone to the inspectorate for them to determine. 047423 VAR. That's on the verge of being approved. We're just waiting for the signature from a unilateral undertaking for the Tamar Valley what's called now, Estuaries Management Plan. And the application 099823 OPA, that again is likely to be determined relatively quickly. It is an allocated site, but the layout is not really appropriate currently, so that may well be recommended for refusal, but hasn't yet. Hatherley Market, which is 172323 VAR, that's actually also been determined and issued. That's it. Thank you.
Okay, final shout for questions on applications, major applications. Councillor Mann.
Sorry, it's not actually about major applications, but one of the first things that I've had happen is lots of people asking me about delays on minor applications, I guess, householder applications, and I wonder, do we see those? Do they come up? Is that something that we have to address on an individual basis if they're past their deadlines for, and, you know, what's the process that I would use to do that?
If you have a number that you want to let me know about, that would be helpful, and I can address that. I am aware, so people, if applications do take too long to determine, we have a complaints process. I would rather, if possible, if members came to me, and I will see what the issues are and seek to address them. Yeah.
Okay, that's it, ladies and gentlemen. It's the end of the planning committee. 27 minutes, I think. Could be a record, I'm not sure. Can we stop the live streaming?